Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Investors Bank, PSE&G, committed to providing safe, reliable energy now and in the future. United Airlines, Johnson & Johnson, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, the Turrell Fund, supporting right from the start NJ, the Russell Berry Foundation, making a difference, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and by the Adler Aphasia Center, enriching the lives of people with aphasia, their families, and communities. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber, building connections, driving business growth, and by NorthJersey.com and Local IQ, part of the USA Today network.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there is always something to learn.
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No.
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
That's a good question. High five.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato, coming to you remotely, and we are honored to be joined, kick off this program with BJ Schecter, who is editor and publisher of Baseball America, also a professional in residence at Seton Hall University. Good to see you, BJ.
Good to see you too, Steve. Thanks for having me.
By the way, let's put in perspective exactly what Baseball America is and why it matters.
So Baseball America has been around for 40 years. It's considered the Bible of baseball. We cover the future of the game. So not necessarily the Yankees and the Mets, but their farm programs, their farm systems, and the draft is our Super Bowl. And so everything leading up to the next big thing, we've been discovering it for the last 40 years.
So we're putting you in a tough spot because we're taping on July 13th. We never try to hide when we're taping. It'll be seen after. We don't know what's going to be happening with baseball as it relates to COVID-19. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I try to be optimistic and realistic at the same time. I think the odds of us getting through a 60-game season are probably less than 70%. I think they'll do their best to get started, but given where we are in the world right now, given the number of cases that we're seeing, and it's not the NBA. This is not a bubble that these players are in. So they're in different parts of the country. And so I think it's going to be very, very tough to get through a complete season.
But what's so interesting is we have a 16-year-old son who plays baseball. And as we do this program, he's getting ready to go to practice, middle of July. They think there's going to be a fall season. Who knows? Does what happens in professional baseball influence college baseball, high school baseball, club baseball, baseball everywhere?
I think it's not just baseball. I think what's happening in the three professional sports that are about to get started here in the U.S., which are baseball, MLS, and the NHL, it influences everything. So if they are successful and can get through a season and can manage testing and really manage the number of cases, I think it bodes well for not just professional sports, but college sports, youth sports, as you mentioned. I coach a travel team, 10-year-olds. We've been practicing, we've been playing games. They're very strict protocols. So far, so good, but we're still being very cautious. I think the world is watching to see first what happens in baseball.
Your work at Seton Hall as a professional in residence, I greatly appreciate your work because we also had Bob Lee on with us.
The best.
Literally the best at ESPN all those years, and now connected to you and your colleagues at Seton Hall University. Seton Hall, one of our higher ed partners. Describe the work that you're doing there as it relates to sports media, if you will, and why it particularly matters now.
Yeah, I think it matters now more than ever, which is kind of ironic because we don't have sports right now.
Right.
I came to Seton Hall 3 years ago to build an innovative and transformative sports media program. And we say media, not sports writing, not sports journalism, for a reason, because it's really a multifaceted business. And we're seeing that right now from the very top at ESPN to local newspapers and local television networks that are struggling. And to really understand and be successful in the business today for students that are coming into it, I tell my students all the time that the path that I took to get to the top of my field does not exist anymore. It's a different path. We may not even know what that path is. Students, young males and females coming into this business are going to have to blaze their own trail. So you really have to understand not only how to create content on different platforms, but understand business plans,
That's right.
how to monetize content, how to raise money, paywall, everything. It's a lot deeper than when you and I first started doing this, Steve. So I really wanted to, really touch on all aspects and create well-rounded students that could come into, this ever-changing media landscape, and it changes by the day, especially now.
Sure.
So
It's so interesting. You're talking about students. I'm sorry for interrupting. It's part of the video technology, the remote technology. But as I think about it, not just for young students who are going into or want to go into sports media, but even for veterans like myself, adapting, broadcasting remotely, finding different platforms to do what we do, creating new content, monetizing it, doing the business side. So, like I said, Seton Hall, one of our higher ed sponsors and underwriters. Without that, no money, no mission. Forget it. It doesn't happen. So the whole concept of sports media will never be what it was, but what it's going to be, we don't really know.
We don't. And with, with times of adversity, there's opportunities that we don't know about that we can create. I mean, 3 years ago, nobody was talking about The Athletic in sports media, and they raised over $200 million in 3+ years. So it is possible. You mentioned, Bob Lee, who's become a really, really good friend of mine and helping, me, mold and build this program, has been a tremendous sounding board. We've talked about, and we're exploring at Seton Hall doing a master class, not only for students that are coming up in the field, but people that are in the field that are looking to better themselves and adapt to the changing culture.
That's right.
That's another thing we're exploring.
It's interesting. So the other part of this, BJ, is that the role of universities changing dramatically. We had your president on recently, Dr. Nair, and what's so interesting to me is it's not the traditional academic curriculum. It is adapting, responding, being innovative. Status quo, not an option, correct?
It's not, and Dr. Nair, more than anybody else, understands it, and I'm thrilled that he came to Seton Hall last academic year. He actually came to one of my classes in the spring, so he's come to our events. So he really understands and sees the opportunity, and that's, quite frankly, Steve, that's why they brought in someone like me. And you have to think outside the box. You have to think different ideas. And if you look at what universities offer, they offer resources, free labor, editors like myself that can partner with news organizations, small and large, and produce content at no cost.
Yeah.
And there's tremendous opportunity there, not only for the university and training students, but media outlets that are struggling to produce content and cut costs at the same time.
Well said. By the way, while BJ is doing what he's doing at the university at Seton Hall, let me also just share, and I've said this before, that I've been a visiting lecturer at the Buccino Leadership Institute, and I've taught in person and then since COVID remotely. And we don't get to put it this way, we don't dictate what the reality is, but as BJ said, we have to adapt, be innovative, and make a difference no matter what we do and have impact. BJ, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. We wish you all the best, to you and your family and the family at Seton Hall. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
We'll be right back right after this.
To watch more one-on-one with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
This is Uncut. I'm Steve Adubato. For the first time on Uncut, she's been with us many times before, but this is the first time on Uncut, is Elisse Glennon, Executive Director, New Jersey Sharing Network Foundation. Good to see you, my friend.
Great to see you too, Steve.
We're doing this uncut on the 8th of July. A lot of things happening as we speak. Before we talk about the virtual games, and before we talk about September 13th, celebration of life, a whole bunch of things going on, talk about COVID-19 and its impact on organ and tissue donation and transplants.
Well, I'm very happy to report that as of today, as of the last month, all of our New Jersey transplant programs are fully back up and running. Our staff is fully back. Our lab is functioning 24 hours a day, as they always have been, but we are doing all of the testing for the matching between donors and recipients. Our call center hasn't skipped a beat. But there was a period of time there, Steve, that the transplants programs did have to temporarily suspend non-emergency transplant due to COVID-19.
So, we're actually talking to a whole range of physicians, surgeons, people who work closely with the sharing network about this. And they were saying that the new protocols, the safety measures in the age of COVID have been critically important to moving forward and making progress. Fair?
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's so interesting. You don't think through all the ramifications of that, but the clinical experts we've had on have really been great about talking about that. But here's something I want to talk about. So the transplant games, last time you were on, Joe Roth, Joe Roth, the CEO, everyone's excited. Jersey Sharing Network, you get the transplant games, they're going to be in New Jersey, all over, huge. COVID hits. So confirm when they're happening in 2021. When is that?
We're still calling them the 2020 Transplant Games, just happening next summer in 2021. They will take place July 16th to the 21st. So basically, same week next summer.
Make everyone aware of what's going to happen and why that's so important, because we'll keep plugging it all year. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We've been plugging it. You've been plugging it for the last 2 years, as all of our partners have been working very hard to make this program happen, and we'll continue to do that, like you said, for the next year. It's going to kick off with a Guinness record attempt for the largest number of living donors in one place. That'll happen at Prudential Center outside on Championship Plaza as we head into the opening ceremony at Prudential. Events then will take place throughout the next 6 days up at American Dream, at NJ Pack, and all over North Jersey at a variety of different venues.
So what's so interesting is as we do this program on the 8th, there are virtual games taking place, and people can go on the New Jersey Sharing Network website, which will be up as I speak right now. They go on the site that we're taping before the virtual games, but you can see them at any point. What will people see there?
So what we wanted to do is we wanted to keep the momentum going, keep people excited to come to New Jersey from all over the country and all over the world. So over the 5-day period, July 20th to 24th, and it'll be all taped and available online, like you said, there's going to be a sneak peek at all of the venues. There will be what we're calling a Zoom of athletes. In the opening ceremony, the real live opening ceremony, we have a parade of athletes. So we're going to do a Zoom of athletes, and you're going to see the different teams and talk about the games. You will be introduced to all of the fun things that New Jersey has to offer, again, in kind of a way to excite people to come here. So there'll be a sneak preview of it all.
I know it sounds like we're doing a lot of plugging, but there are a lot of events. On September 13th, a celebration of life. What is that, and why does that matter so much?
Well, you've been coming for the last 10 years, and I appreciate it. This year is our 10th annual 5K celebration of life. Your typical walk run, but it's really not typical. Our motto is that it's more than a 5K. It's a celebration of life. This year obviously is a little bit different. We can't get everybody together in person, but we will be holding a program on September 13th. We're hoping that there can be some sort of a live component bringing people together, but as everyone's doing with their events, we're monitoring all of the state and federal guidelines on that. But there will be at least a virtual component if we can't get together in person.
The COVID-19 situation has impacted all of us on every level. You're a nonprofit, we're a nonprofit. By the way, to disclose, Elisse is on our board of trustees. Also, we've been partnering with the Sharing Network for so many years. The ongoing effort to raise money, to raise awareness, to keep doing what you're doing and giving the gift of life, that doesn't slow down. You have to adapt and adjust to COVID-19, but the mission doesn't slow down.
No, not at all. And I like the way that you said that. Obviously, we're all trying to adapt. You mentioned it before, but our clinical operations, our nurses, our surgical technicians, our lab staff, they still were going into the hospitals. They were, taking all of the various precautions, and their world adapted a little bit for safety reasons, but they were still going out there front lines. Our building, just like hospitals, has the big sign, healthcare heroes work here. And so that didn't change. But you're correct, though, on fundraising and awareness efforts. That really had to change because the majority of what we did was in-person events. So we've moved everything online like you have here. And we're finding that our community still has that motivation, still has that energy to share their story, and get people to get involved, learn more, and register to be an organ donor. And that certainly hasn't stopped.
Before I let you go, remind people how they can register.
They can go to our website, njsharingnetwork.org, and click register to be an organ donor. And may I also, yes.
Go ahead. Hey,
I want to acknowledge our partners in the transplant. Our medical partners are Hackensack Meridian Health and RWJ Barnabas Health. And where I'm sitting right now doing this interview with you is at our other strong partner, the Meadowlands Live Convention and Visitors Bureau. So they've been our partners since the get-go as well.
Absolutely. By the way, I mentioned the driver's license. The driver's license, you still can do what you have to do to make it clear you want to be an organ and tissue donor, right?
You can do that if you go in person at motor vehicle, but if you're going to do anything online, you should do that at our website or on your Apple iPhone in the Health app. You can also click organ donor there.
Elisse, whether we're together in person or virtually like this, we'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you. You knew that already. Continuing to get the message out, create more public awareness about the extraordinarily important need for people, not just to know, but to seriously consider giving the gift of life, because there are so many people waiting. Elisse, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
To watch more one-on-one with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We are pleased to be joined by Ian Bremmer, who is the president of the Eurasia Group and also host of GZero World with Ian Bremmer. Good to see you, Ian.
Glad to be with you, sir.
You can, by the way, for those of you who are fans of public broadcasting, not only do you see us, but more importantly, you can check out Ian and his team Saturday mornings at 10:30 on WNET and also all around the country on public broadcasting, and which is a big deal to be able to have that audience. Describe for folks what the mission of the broadcast is.
It's really to try to bring the world to viewers and make them 10% less crazy. You know what it's like when people are watching cable news and they're digesting social media, and the politics are so fractured, they're so polarized. And I will tell you that even though I spend my life trying to understand politics, I'm not remotely political. And I like to believe that if we bring a little bit of humor and also we bring authenticity, you can talk to the entire political spectrum. And it's particularly true because the United States is such a narrow slice of the rest of the world. And when you show people just how different perspectives are outside the United States, it helps show us that our differences really are a little bit less nerve-wracking, less rage-inducing. So I think that all that is helpful.
You know, it's interesting. You and I were talking right before we got on the air, and your series, GZero World, not only started out on WNET, but now is across the country on PBS. But Neil Shapiro, our president, and also Steven Seagal are key players with the creative news group at WNET. They saw something that they've often told us with our production company is that intelligent, important, engaging conversation more important than ever before, particularly in the age of COVID-19, Ian?
Sure, because I mean, I think even educated people, well-educated people in this environment would be excused for not knowing when and how they should wear a mask, would be excused for not knowing whether or not the United States was getting all this wrong, and if so, who, would be excused for not even knowing when we eventually have a vaccine, whether or not they should actually be an early taker of that vaccine, or they should wait. We know very little still about this virus, and much of what we know has been contradicted, not just politically, but also by the same actors frequently. And so, when you have that, you really need to cut through the noise. And I understand that a lot of people would just they'd shrug their shoulders, they'd throw up their hands, and they'd say, enough already. Let me just, have a beer with my friends and stop with the lunacy. And so I think that if you have a trusted person, a trusted institution, that maybe we get it wrong, but that we're going to tell you what we really think. We're going to be honest with you. We're not trying to sell you a line. We don't
have a horse in this race.
A political agenda. It's so important.
And I'm sorry for interrupting, but something you just said about a political agenda. Often people will say to me, oh, the media, the whole fake news thing, enemy of the people, which I don't have a lot of tolerance for because we're just doing our best, making mistakes, as you said. But you don't have an agenda. We don't have an agenda other than informing. How dare we? The idea of politicizing a mass, politicizing this COVID-19 crisis, forget about just in the United States, but around the world. Are we unique in that way, that it's so politicized as opposed to a public health global pandemic that we're all in together? Do I have that wrong?
We're not unique. Certainly we've seen a lot of this in Brazil, which is the largest economy in South America. In fact, I'd argue that they've politically mishandled this worse than the United States. We've seen some of it in the United Kingdom and other countries. But I'll tell you the other side of this, which is a much more optimistic message. And that is, if you want to understand the leaders, the countries, the governments that have so far done a good job around coronavirus, really served their citizens well. It's not about rich versus poor countries. It's not about democratic versus authoritarian. It's not about small versus big. All of the countries that have done a good job across all of those characteristics, you find leaders that got in front of it early. They led with science and expertise. It was not cheerleading, and it was bringing the country together ahead of politics. And in most cases, there weren't elections coming up soon, which also really matters, right? So you can look at countries as diverse as Vietnam, South Korea, Germany, New Zealand, Norway, Greece, Uruguay, radically different countries, but they all have this in common, and it really has made a difference in getting their people back to something that feels like normalcy.
When you cover the 2020 election, analyzing, making sense of it, will any of the focus be on the role of other countries having an interest in, to say the least, if not potentially impacting that election?
Sure, it's a factor. It was a factor in 2016. We knew that the Russians were intervening. They were spending some money at the margins. They were engaging in promotion of propaganda and fake news to make us angrier, to divide us more. We didn't respond well. President Obama, assuming that Hillary was going to win and not getting support from Republicans in Senate, said, I'm not going to deal with it. In retrospect, a mistake. President Trump certainly isn't planning on dealing with it. He doesn't have a problem with it. And if it happens, he thinks it's largely probably going to benefit him more than Biden. But I don't think, if you ask me what are the problems with a quote unquote rigged or unfair or unfree US election, the issue is not Russia. The issue is not China or Iran or North Korea. The issue is us. The Russians tried the same thing in Germany in terms of promoting all this fake information, and it didn't get anywhere in the German elections because the German people weren't having it. because the German people weren't so divided because they were focusing on a much more real political conversation. I think what we need to do in the United States is get our own house in order. The reason the Russians had any influence at all is because we let them. Because we had so many people that were ready to believe the worst, that were so angry, that believed that the system had taken advantage and that our establishment on the left and the right were taking advantage of their fellow country members. The more important thing is not the fact that Trump is president, it's how did we get to the point that 40% of the population would support someone like that? Something like that's been happening for decades, and we need to take responsibility for that reality.
On that note, I just want to remind folks that if you're looking for a meaningful, substantive analysis, trying to make sense of a chaotic world that we're living in, check out Ian and his colleagues every Saturday on WNET at 10:30 a.m. And also across the country. And by the way, the website has been up for the entire program so people can check it out. Ian Bremmer, the president of the Eurasia Group and also the host of GZero World with Ian Bremmer and a great team of journalists. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Ian.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ian. I'm Steve Adubato. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by Investors Bank, PSE&G, United Airlines, Johnson & Johnson, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, the Turrell Fund, supporting Right from the Start NJ, the Russell Berry Foundation, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and by the Adler Aphasia Center. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber, and by NorthJersey.com and Local IQ, part of the USA Today network.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Zalkin. It costs much more to care for an infant than for an older child, and many New Jersey child care centers don't have the funding they need. Because of this, many children in New Jersey don't have their basic needs met. Right from the Start NJ is dedicated to supporting this vulnerable population, children from birth to age 3. We know that the early years are the most critical, and we believe that every child deserves a bright beginning and a healthy future.